Om Haranmaye Parikoshe Virajan Brahmanishkalam Tatyubram Jyotisham Jyoti Tadyadatma Vido Vidu. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Shining like burnished gold, highest and deepest, the core intelligence of living beings, partless and indivisible, ever pure, free of all taint, the essence of everything, in everything, which all beings seek, either knowingly or unknowingly, there shines Brahman. It is that which the Guru teaches. It is that which the wise ones exult in. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupa Stitir Eva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavo Vahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshvahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And so, with our classic beginning to these Dharmic classes, in traditional fashion, reciting the Sanskrit slokas, we kick off this 5th class. I hope I'm right about that, because I tend to lose track of time. I hope that's a good thing. In spiritual terms it is. But I think it's the 5th class of 6, and next week we will be concluding it. And about the 3rd or 4th class, middle of last week, we edged our way out of preoccupation with rusty minds. We're calling this the rust of spiritual life, how to dissolve it. No way to dissolve it is sadhana. So halfway through last class, we started to edge towards the sadhana part of this series. Of course, which could go on and on for many classes, and I just finished editing actually, a few small edits, and putting it on the YouTube now, of this class series we did last year called Food, Prana, and Sadhana, and how eating pure food gives you pure energy, and how pure energy gives you pure thoughts, and how these pure thoughts can transform you, transform your mind, because there's really nothing to transform. Everything's always transforming in Maya. So Maya's got you way out in front of you in that regard. The change is going on all the time, everywhere. So much so that people become stunned by it and don't realize that there is such a thing called Maya. How many people that you met in your life as you grew up here in the West said, "Oh, you better beware of that world bewitching Maya, buddy." Because nobody ever came up and said that to you. They were just in it. Sri Ramakrishna said, like the fish with the net in its mouth, thinking it's free. So you have to see that there is something to be careful of that you can fall into, and it's the foundation for mundane human convention that our founder Lex Hickson talked about, falling into conventional ways of thinking all the time, and therefore narrowing the scope so much that you don't think universally anymore. We're going to get to that in some of these charts today. So, being able to discern, and is one of the main facets of Vedanta, and it's one of the first things you want to hone when you enter a path of Advaita Vedanta or Zen Buddhism or any of the non-dual pathways that are there. And there are even non-dual teachings in Judaism and Christianity that haven't been focused on or unwrapped. If you did unwrap them, like Meister Eckhart tried to do in early Christianity, then they don't like it, because the Savior is everything. The Almighty Father is everything. That's what this chant I just chanted, Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukta. It's the conclusion of the great system of Vedanta, which is millennia old, which is actually eternal truth, Sanatana Dharma. It's that conclusion that all this is Brahman. So they've managed to stay aware of that in the midst of Maya. It would be like the fish all of a sudden discovering that water existed. See, it lived its whole life in water and it never thought about it. And that's what people do in the world bewitching Maya. And they become very worldly as a result. They forget their divine nature and they don't have peace anymore. They don't have bliss anymore. It's not just the suffering that's the problem there. Sure, you're going to suffer in Maya, but that's only part of it. The real tragedy is that you're cutting off access to your true nature, which is the repository, a foundation of all peace and all bliss and all wisdom, higher wisdom. You're cutting the nadi, or the network, the vein, the nerve, off to that part of your being. So you try and bring it back and open it up with practices. So that's back to what I was just saying. Sadhana is what we're edging into now in this last two and a half classes. That's why I brought these two yogas of Holy Mother. As we know, Swami Vivekananda brought back the 4 yogas in this day and age and called it the new religion. He was so positive that this had been forgotten, and even in the West here being replaced by things like Hatha yoga and so forth, or a little breathing exercise or some occult power. He was so positive and so aware that that was going to happen and was happening, because there was no New Age, as it were, back in 1893 when he hit the American shores. So he was so sure that was going to happen that he declared, oh, here's what real yoga is. Nobody's told you this yet. I'm here on the scene early to let you know. The 4 yogas are the new religion of this age. You don't have to be bound down by mundane human convention anymore. You don't have to be just a Christian or just a Hindu or just a Jew, or lose track of true Christianity, true Judaism and true Hinduism, and float in some sort of foggy New Age notion that I'm one with nature. How could you be one with nature? If you're one with nature, you're going to be one with birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death, under the umbrella of constant change. Is that what you want? If you're aware of it, it's okay. I'm a warrior then, if I'm aware of it. I'm battling Maya, you see. I'm engaged in the battle between good and evil, and good will prevail. Good luck with that. But if you're totally unawares of it, like the fish in water, just swimming around, people walk up and say, have you ever heard of water? Well, that doesn't exist. What do you mean? You see. So if that's your predicament, then you're in this hub of constant change, the Kala Chakra, Lord Buddha called it, the wheel of rebirth in ignorance. And we know Lord Buddha got enlightened 2,500 years ago in India. 2,550 years ago, got enlightened in India. And since then there have been some 52 generations of Buddhism that have marched out of India and have gone to Tibet and China and finally to Japan. Last 2 or 3 generations you have Chinese Buddhism turning into a Zen Buddhism, which is, if you put the Sanskrit side by side with the Japanese, how many correlations you see. We're seeking jnana. They call it hanya. You see, even the words sound the same. And so you see this one eternal truth manifesting out of India, out of Mother India, through all the countries, available to all peoples. How many of them are taking advantage of that? How many came to class today? See, this is a big island. Must not be so big. If it were really big, then we'd be flocking to Dharma teachers to hear, what is that you say? There's such a thing as Maya? Tell me about that. How do I get out of it? So sadhana is the thing. See, I mean, enlightenment, you might as well kind of hands off that. The chant I just chanted said, to realize that all is Brahman, that's called enlightenment. But you have to remain in recognition of it. So every day you have to think, all this is Brahman. Next day, all this is Brahman. Next day, all this is Brahman. How many people can do that? Like when some problem comes to them, all this is Maya, or all this is shit, you see. All this is trouble. All this is vanity and vexation of spirit. That's a mind posture that is going to take over pretty soon, until you become like the cranky old Japanese man up the road that lives near me. Not a smile for anyone, and a lot of obscene gestures instead. So this sadhana is a cutting edge then. It's something that people will awaken to, and they'll come flocking and they'll say, what's that you say about this? I want to measure this now against the depth of my own soul. And in terms of great Dharma teachings like that, then enlightenment, you might as well say, hold on there, boy. Enlightenment, well, I can quote Suzuki Roshi. He's a great Zen Buddhist, one of those two generations that just happened to Japan of Buddhism coming 52 generations long. He said, enlightenment, oh, that's an accident. But sadhana makes us accident prone. Spiritual practice makes us accident prone. So what we want is to take up this practice and expose ourselves to enlightenment. Because it always is. It doesn't happen, it's an accident, he's saying. You're looking for it, all of a sudden you find that you're it. And so when you find you're it, then everything before that was a dream, you see. But while you were in the dream, you thought the dream was real. So there's just this inexplicable occurrence happening that made its way into your mind, like you recognized. In Tantra, the word is pratyabhigya. One of the most powerful words is recognition of who you are. And it's pretty much the same in Buddhism and Vedanta. You have to come to know somehow. But all the methods that you use to come to know themselves are in Maya. That's the flummoxing thing. There's a lower Maya, of course. Then there's a higher Maya. The higher Maya is thinking I can get enlightened by sadhana. No, you really can't. I mean, I'll jump ahead to it in this chart here. In order to benefit by sadhana, spiritual practice, two great points are to be reflected upon at the outset. First, it is helpful to know that spiritual practice will not net one freedom or enlightenment, which is more a matter of grace married to right timing. And that's the accident. Freedom is indigenous to the soul. Thus, transformation is in and of the mind, not the true self, which does not require any regimen of purification. So that's the first point. We'll get to the second when we take up this chart. So that's the idea. You have to, when you enter into a sadhana, tell yourself, this isn't going to gain me enlightenment. Why? Because I'm already enlightened. I just don't know it. My nature is enlightenment. I could jump ahead to some other quotes too. Actually, we read one of them last Sunday. Let's reread that because it applies very nicely here. Get my version out here so I don't have to crane my neck. One should meditate upon the elements that compose the universe. So this is where we jump into the idea of conjunctions. And let me refer to this chart for this quote that I'm referring to about all is Brahman. He says, "I am the stimulator of the tree of the universe. My fame is high, like a mountaintop. Elevated to the most holy, I am the excellent immortal being, as he is in the sun. I am the power, the wealth, refulgent with divine intuition. I am imperishable and immutable," the Rishi says in the Taittiriya Upanishad. So that's on another chart that I'm referring to, that we will look at. So this kind of assurance is enlightenment, but up to the point when you have it dawn on you, if you want to say, or it blooms, or it comes out of nowhere as an accident, you are in this dream of Maya. You are dreaming the three worlds. And when you woke up for it, then you don't see three worlds or even a fourth world anymore. You just see one immovable, stationary, all-pervasive, static reality that's pervading everything. And you're it. And there's no difference between you and them. So, people are always saying, "Oh, you people." You see, it's like a politically incorrect term these days. It's, "Oh, that's the problem with you people." What do you mean, you people? Aren't you one of us people too? See, aren't we all one? Don't you know the universal truth yet? So it's some sort of political slur or some sort of cultural slur that people are laboring under. When you find out that all blood is red, you know that all bodies are made of the 5 elements and those kinds of things, then you can start to put those kinds of misfiances to rest. And then you can come back to this idea, as cliche as it might sound, of the oneness of all things. It really means the not two-ness of all things. Because if you say oneness, you're limiting that to one. And you don't want to do that simply because both being and becoming are in potential in Brahman. It has the power to become. And if you're taking a very monastic look at that, from the standpoint of the worlds are illusory, then you're probably going to say, "I'll allow for it, but it's Maya." And that's basically what you find in Vedanta and so forth, at that high level. But if you're taking a more kind view, then you'll say, becoming is also an occurrence in Brahman. Like a reflection of a moon in a mud puddle. See, it's not the real moon, but it does cause you to look up to the real moon and to know that there is something real and something unreal. So, I mean, these simple analogies and metaphors are just there for us simple folk, so that we can know the nature of reality without having to plumb huge systems of philosophy or read lots of scriptures. It's very simple, really. The truth is very simple. But it's simply profound, too. And so some of us like to go into the simply profound part of that simple, because then we want to learn how to come back and explain it to people who are suffering from not knowing, the illusion of not knowing. You don't come back and help people. You come back to remind people that they're the same as you if you're at that high level of understanding. Whatever level of understanding you are, whether it's the parent helping the child's the same as the parent, it's got the same potentials, probably the child's going to become greater than the parent, just like the disciple might become greater than the guru. And the guru knows this, and the parent knows this, or should know this. Nevertheless, is helping a person who's laboring under less abilities, hasn't got their development yet. So becoming is a facet that is overlooked. So if you're talking that way, you're talking more Tantra than Vedanta. You're saying becoming is in the potential of Shiva. Shiva is all being, doesn't like to get into form, but it does somehow get into form. And so you sort of solve the philosophical conundrums of real and unreal, and higher and lower, and better and worse. And you vibrate to this singular position of Advaita, non-duality, universalism. There are words in English you can actually use to describe it. So that's how I'm segueing into this last half of this chart, because in the last week we looked at the first half of it. It's about Maha Samhita. That is how the great connections. According to this rishi, and this school of rishis that come out of the Taittiriya Upanishad, like I said, if you're sitting in a trailer right now with a blanket wrapped around you in 19-degree weather, and you can see your breath on the air even inside the house, and you've got an Upanishad in front of you, you're like reliving Walt Whitman's life, you see, or some of the great Americans who went out into the forest with the Upanishads and just sat with them out there and got their enlightenment in this lifetime. These were Western souls. So, even up into your old age. See, basically you keep this position, this ability, this capacity. It's not like old friends sat on the park bench like bookends. See, why would we want to do that when we're old? Sit on park benches and feel sorry for ourselves. See, we want to mature and take it into our old age, so that old age will be defeated. Just a fool otherwise. So you must return to your true nature as being what he's telling you in that last, I am the stimulator of the tree of the universe. If the universe is going to grow, I'll be the stimulator of it. I'll be the one that makes it grow. And come to find out, like the Advaita says, I've realized that these three worlds got vomited up by me. And it was not a good thing to do, so I dissolved them. He didn't want that suffering anymore. He didn't want the idea that he was growing anymore. He didn't want the idea that he was becoming something that he already was. He gave all that up. So this is the stark difference between the non-dual realization, that kind of enlightenment, that singular type of samadhi, and all the other beautiful paths that come out of it. Qualified, dualistic, fundamentalist, ignorant. See? And, agyana, no knowledge whatsoever. Like you walk around a woods, but you never know that there's fire in wood. So you freeze, you see. But someone else walks around and they say there's fire in wood. See? I think I can maybe somehow learn to bring it out. See? Someone else has already cut the tree down and has got a pile of firewood there, and he's set for the winter, warm and toasty and cooking his food for others. So that's the difference between an agyani, a gyani, and a vijnani. An agyani just doesn't know there's fire in wood. So there are people walking around, unbeknownst to them, is the fact that everything's connected. So this is called Maha Samhita, great connections to be made. According to the old rishis, the ancient rishis, the Taittiriya Upanishad, they saw 5 of these great connections. And we looked at last week earth, firmament, atmosphere, and air. This is what they bring together. And down here it says, one should meditate upon the elements that compose the universe. Earth, intermediate space, heaven, sky. Well, that's this, see. Meditate on them. So you take them as individual things, and then you connect them into a great Mahasamhita. A Mahasamhita means you bring 2 into 1. Just like when you look at each other and you like each other, you go, right? Oh, I really revere that person. So you do this. So 2 become 1. That's namaste, or namaskaram. So you should be doing that with everything, because you're in a world of fragmentation. Not only nature has fragmentation, the human mind is becoming more and more fragmented. The passing of every century, passing of every millennia. In this age, ages which are 480,000 years long, times 4, times 8, makes up a huge age, you see. So there are long, long ages of people. You have to go by the physical idea of evolution. You have to pass that up. Like you're once a monkey or something, forget that. You were always who you are, the Atman. And you borrowed forms from nature. And you took them on and you gave them up. And you took them on and you gave them up. Isn't it about time you see yourself doing that? Because if you see yourself doing that, you can be free. Get off the wheel of birth and death. No, don't be born in inferior wombs anymore, Krishna says in the Gita. Everyone's saying it in all religions. Birds have nests, foxes have holes. Don't think Christ didn't say it. You don't have any place to lay your head here in the five elements. These are not your home. So it really doesn't behoove you, and it's really very ignoble to make yourself into a body and live in a world made of five elements and think that's the only reality. That's ignoble. It's low, it's mean, it's gross. And that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is that you have this divine nature in you that's the same in everyone else and in everything else. The Atman doesn't change in quality or quantity as it permeates everything. The same Atman is in the microphone as in me. See, the mechanism is different. This mechanism is allowed to see the Atman if it wants to search for it, but this object can't. An animal can't get enlightenment in that body. It doesn't have the mechanism for it yet. So consciousness is identifying with everything, but beyond that, consciousness is in everything as an all-pervasive presence, not as a form. So when you see forms, you're not seeing the all-pervasive presence. And Sri Ramakrishna said, when you see the all-pervasive presence, you don't see the form anymore. That's the beauty of it, you see. The further you go towards Brahman, the farther away you fall from the world, he said. And this was his conclusion by having samadhi. When he went so deep into samadhi that he had that look, you see, it was like blissful and his eyes were looking inward. He was going closer to Brahman, and he was forgetting everything back there, as it were, in the worlds. He was forgetting Narendra, he was forgetting his young boy disciples, he was forgetting his wife, Holy Mother, he was forgetting the Kali temple, he was even forgetting Kali. So he went toward the light and he became that light, and then everything else fell away. So all of this happens, or can happen again. It should happen again if you make connections. So there's the first one, you see. Connect this earth with atmosphere, ether, see, and the air you breathe. Make sure that you know that this is a great connection here, because if you don't take it apart singly and look at it and then put it back together in its composite form, you'll forget about all the elements to it and the dynamics in it, and you'll just take it for granted. Does it sound like life out here? Taking everything for granted. Going much things and not knowing their meaning, where they came from, what their origin is, how they work, really. Even forget how they work. So it would be the difference between a person who saw objects, desired objects, then grasped onto objects, possessed objects, and became preoccupied with objects. That's like 5 steps of relationship between the ignorant person, ignorant mind, and the object. They see it, they desire it, they covet it, they grasp it, they possess it, and they won't let go of it. So different than that is a person who looks at objects and doesn't want them. He's looking at them to see where they came from. When he sees that they came from, where they came from, it's called a great connection. And now he wants to be the great connector. He wants to be the stimulator, you see. We were just reading, to be the stimulator of the tree of the universe. We'll get to that hopefully later today. I am the stimulator of the tree of the universe. Before he was thinking, I'm just the universe. I'm one with objects. I'm one with matter. I'm one with nature. So nature has 6 transformations: birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. Is that you? Is that what you want to be? Isn't that where your suffering's coming from? Do you want to alleviate your suffering? Do you want to get free? You want to be free like you are? Your Atman's always free. Then why can't I be like my Atman? Cut yourself in the image is exactly what Christ meant by that. He's not talking about some God in heaven. He's talking about the kingdom of heaven that's within you. And you're that God. And there is not many of them. There's just one. You'll see many when you first start in, just like you're seeing many out here. But then when you see the many gods, you'll render them all into one because you'll find out that they're all connected. Watching Jay Krishnamurti on the YouTube the other day, and he's talking to a bunch of Hindus, and he said, back in the 60s, Hindus are all like looking at him with amazement, because he's saying things that they haven't thought of since Vivekananda was here, probably. So he says, do you realize that you have several 100,000 gods in this country? Why? I mean, can't you go beyond the worship of all these different gods that are causing all these different separations and just realize that it all comes from one, that there's just one indivisible God? And don't think that the Americans have it up on the Hindus when they say there's just one God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, because that's political you're talking about. We don't know anything about God. The Hindus know much more about God than we do. They've studied him for thousands and thousands of years, and we're only 200 years old here as a culture. So don't think that. But you can think that superstition and myth and mythology and various things have taken over the Hindu mindset, which is why great souls come back in India so often to, like Buddha, to get them off the wheel and birth and death with their ancestors. Oh, remember, it's been some 500 years since I told you this, but here I am again. You're on a wheel. And this is like telling the fish that there's something called water. Oh, really? See? So the wake-up call comes in various forms, and you want to heed it. Heedlessness is the rust of the watchman, Buddha says. Heedlessness is the rust of the watchman. See, so he doesn't want to fall asleep on his job. The whole city will get ravaged. Nobody will be ready. See? Maya will ravage the whole city of the world if some great soul doesn't keep out that rust of heedlessness from his mind, and what keeps his single eye open. Well, what's the rest of monasteries? Non-recitation of scripture. The monasteries, the monks get together to study the scriptures so that they keep it in the human mindset. They're not just studying, or shouldn't be just studying for themselves to get their individual enlightenment. They should be reciting the scriptures daily, because the sound of the scriptures going out into the ether connects to the mind through study. So the reason they're doing this is to keep this great wisdom prevalent in the human mindset, whether people know it or not. You do what you do, don't you? Whether it benefits others or not. And really the purpose is just to do. See? But you have to have the power of being first, and then the power of doing will make some sense. See? The power of doing has no real lasting effect if the power of being doesn't accompany it. So first I am, then I do. And we've been taught, even recently in European philosophers, I think, therefore I am. But Vedanta comes to us in the form of Vivekananda and says, no, actually that's not true. You've got the cart before the horse. It's I am, therefore I think. I'm the Atman first, and then from that everything comes out. My mind comes, then it thinks. Hopefully there's some intelligence there. I find it, I apply it. And if the case is that I got so far away from all that and didn't know what happened to me, and I found myself in a human body, then the way back is, according to the Rishi of the Taittiriya Upanishad, is to make these great connections back inside. That's what you do. So you take each of these things and you meditate on them individually. You actually sit and meditate on them. There's the brook, there's the river, there's the mountain. What would happen if you sat and meditated on the mountain for a few weeks? Probably the same thing that happened to Buddha, who sat under a tree and meditated there for 40 days or more. 40 days and 40 nights seems to be about the amount of time you need to do to connect with yourself, whether you call it Atman or Buddha nature. So if you meditate on the mountain, you take the mountain as your teacher. Oh, I see you're stationary. You don't change. Maybe on the outside, but on the inside you remain rock solid. Therefore, O mountain, you're my teacher of changelessness, immutability. I'll take you as my teacher. So you meditate on each and every thing, and then you connect it with its predecessor. So you remember we read this last week, it's worth repeating. The illumined seer who revealed this essential wisdom by deep intuition, having grouped the various elements of existence, declared that the entire universe of gross and subtle worlds is based in sets of fives, and that one set of fives enables and preserves the next set of fives. So, you're enabling, I am the stimulator of the tree of the universe, right? So how did that happen? Because my five senses enabled the five elements. What would the five elements be to you if you didn't have your five senses? And what would the five senses and the five elements be to you if you didn't have the mind? In other words, what happened to you in deep sleep tonight? There were no five elements. There were no five senses. There was just some empty void that you don't remember. So what happened to me? I'm the stimulator of the tree of the universe, so I decided to stop stimulating it. See? I took the vibration away from it. Because everything is vibration. Even science will tell you that. So what happens if I stop the vibration? I'll take it all back into its source. Where's the source? Oh, surprise. Like the other kind of Japanese man said, supplies. So I am that thou art. All existence is, and it came out of this me with a capital M, or this I amness, not just the ego I, because that forgot. It came out of the true I. So Brahman has this power of becoming in it, we were saying to start the class. Well, another one of these we looked at last week was teacher, student, study, and the power of imparting. That's called transmission. If you put a good student together with a good teacher, and one has studied and the other is starting to study, then the teacher can impart, breathe the wisdom of that into the soul. Patanjali says, when the yogi's alive, he makes daughters and he makes sons who are yogis and yoginis after he passes. So he breathes the life of jnanam into them, and they wake up with this jnanam, because you cannot get enlightenment without jnanam. Probably can't have real love without jnanam. You can't do real service without jnanam. And you can't meditate very effectively without jnanam. This is self-knowledge. If you don't know yourself, what are all these other things to you? And how are you doing them? Sporadically, without success in the end, many lifetimes being a meditator but never reaching the goal. It's all because you don't know yourself. The minute you know yourself, all these things become fruitful. Like Jesus, I have so many fruits to give, but I can't give them to someone who's not open and available. I can't cast pearls before swine. So great connections are to be made. We're talking about coming from the outside in. From the outside in. It's all indivisible. Ram shouldn't have to do this, bringing the two into one. This is a part of sadhana. And actually, the way it's being described here by this Upanishad is a very subtle type of sadhana. It's all in here, in the mind. Because it fell apart in the mind, and it became all this. That's why he says, why should I vomit the three worlds anymore? It's not noble of me to do that. He says in his stotram, the idea of university and diversity is not us. because Brahman is undivided in its nature. So even speaking from a very high standpoint, I mean, he'll even sing it to you if you need to hear it that way. He will sing.
Shuddham Vishuddham Avicharam Anantarupam Nirlepalepam Avicharam Anantarupam Nishkanda Avicharam Shantanarupam Gyanamritam Samarasam Gaganopamoham Gyanamritam Samarasam Gaganopamoham. So he sings very beautifully to that very principle. He says, knowing the Supreme Brahman, one dares not place it in the context of divided or undivided, or pure or polluted, or having form or being formless. Effulgent like the sun, it is infinite and beyond even the intellect. I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky, infinite like space. So how he would sing it thousands of years ago, and how we would recreate it here in English, in transliterated form, with the same non-dual message, unclouded, uncluttered, just coming through in the same power. All we need to do is connect to it, just like we would connect to study, to our students, like the Advaita, to our teachers, see, and him imparting it. So what you're doing when you pick up a scripture and reading is a great connection. It's one way of looking at it. And so you just do it. What's keeping me from doing it? I can't sit like this. I'm sitting on a park bench like an old friend. Seriously. What happened to me? I never get old. The Atma never ages. Why am I all of a sudden thinking of myself as being old? I must be the eternal youthful Shiva. That must be my mental position, and let the body go where it will. So you don't put Brahman in the context of divided or undivided. If you're doing that, you're following the path of rationale and you're still arguing. You haven't come to realize that it's undivided by its very nature. So people are saying, oh, Brahman is undivided, or it seems to be divided in all things. It's a nice way of explaining it, but you're still not looking at the essence of the thing and snapping to the essence of the thing. I am undivided. I am the stimulator of the tree of the universe. I am invested with all highest intuition. That's me. That's in me. I am. So, regular person sees the objects, runs, grasps it, holds it, possesses it, right? But the person who doesn't have anything to do with possessions or ownership or desires or wanting or holding or coveting runs to this wisdom, pulls that to itself, makes the connections, and lets go of everything. Even lets go of the idea of an individual self. And I suppose I made a Freudian slip. Even lets go of the idea of an indivisible self. Because Brahman is, you can't place it in the context of divided or undivided. So, a very beautiful way of putting it. And that's where we could also sing it this way. He has another way of explaining it. In terms of the appearance of Maya, he says, Linga prapancha janusi nachate namacha nirlajamana samidam vibhati binam nirbeda beda rahitam nachate namacha gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham.
He sings on and on, 40 verses like this. It's called I'm calling it the Advaita Chalisa, or the Gyanamritam Samarasam Stotram, or Chalisa. Chalisa means 40, so it's 40 verses. So he says, the creation of these many worlds was not for our benefit. How could they be when Brahman is beyond them, and we are that? It is shameful. It is the shameful mind that has vomited them out. With all their suffering and all their pleasures and all their beauty, it's the shameful mind that vomited these three worlds out. Unity and diversity are not in us, not our nature. We are pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky, infinite like space. So he reminds us over and over and over and over again, at the end of every one of these 40 verses, that he has nothing to do with all this. We have nothing to do with all this. We are this one indivisible Atman, all abiding. If you have to give it a name, Buddha nature, Atman, Tathagata Garbha, pure conscious awareness in English, then you settle on that. Like a bee finally settles on a flower. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that a bird falls asleep on the mast of the ship in the harbor. Ship sails out miles away from land. And the bird's still sleeping. Wakes up in the middle of the ocean. Oh my God, what happened? I got to find land. So it flies north, almost exhausts itself, turns around, flies back to mash the ship. And it says, rests a little bit, flies south. Same thing happens. Flies east, flies west, same thing happens. Finally comes to rest on the mast of the ship. That's us, looking for ourselves out in the universe. We are the stimulator of the tree of the universe. We are that single-masted ship of Brahman that sails all the oceans, knows all the atmospheres, knows all the conjunctions, knows all the wisdom, is there under fire, sun, water, and lightning, another conjunction to make, is the mother, the father, the offspring, and the act of procreating all in one. This is the true nature. And our mind is that bird, flying this way, that way, trying to find land, which doesn't exist anymore. Futile searching. The vexations of dreams that don't have anything in them. People say, follow your dreams, follow your dreams. I'm getting so tired of hearing that. In Vedanta, you wake up from dreams. The songs of India say, oh dreamer, wake up, you must, you must. You're dreaming your lifetimes away. Read Anandul Stotram and find out what the seers have found out about themselves. That there's just one indivisible, indeterminate mass of pure conscious awareness, and that thou art. I've said enough. Go find the truth. See, some of them just stop speaking after a certain time. I tried to explain it through Dharma. I tried to explain it through Jnanam. I tried to explain it through the philosophies and so forth. Now, have you heard it? See, if not, go back to this and find out what isn't conjunct yet, what is non-conjunct, what has not been brought together, and bring it together. This is your last act that you'll ever perform as a human being, or as an embodied being in all the 7 worlds of existence, whether you're a human or an ancestor or an angel, celestial, a demigod, a god, even part of the Trinity. The last act you'll ever commit would be this, bringing it all together, bringing the two into one. Here's Shiva, here's Shakti. I see, actually, they're very nice to look at as two. But look what happens after that. I think I'll just bring them together into oneness. And there you have the beauty of Advaita Vedanta. And there you have the full ripening maturation of Indian wisdom 52 generations later in Japan as Zen Buddhism. And all they're doing is sitting having tea with the Roshi. Taking up a flower, It's the beauty of non-self effort. In the meantime, what's the rest of households? Lack of self-effort. On all levels, really, but the Buddha is really saying the rest of households is that you're not doing your spiritual practice. Even a little every day. Keep that stainless steel, self of your SSS, the stainless steel self. Galvanize yourself. Galvanize that steel. See? Make it rust-proof. Keep yourself in a fine and fettled condition all the rest of the days of your life. How do I check that? Did I take a breath without saying all is Brahman? Did I blink my eyes without, in between a blink of every one of my eyes, was I aware that all was Brahman as I blinked my eyes? There's a kind of mantra that you do, it's called ajapa. Funny, japa means to say the mantra many times. Ajapa means that it's already happening as you take every breath. Saham, saham. Every time you breathe, you're breathing in, I am Brahman. And every time you breathe out, you're saying, I am not the world. So you breathe in, I am Brahman. You breathe out, I am not the world. So oxygen in, carbon dioxide out. Nectar in, poison out. That's how you have to sail your ship in the ocean of Brahman. If you're that mind bird that lit on the mast, you're close. So you're on the mast of that sailing ship. But now you still have this mind that wants to cast itself about in dream. This is a dream here. You're dreaming right now. And as you do, you're vomiting out the three worlds so you can dream in them. And everyone's doing it. Find out, oh, everyone's doing it. It's called, we looked at it 2 weeks ago, Sankalpa. Lord Vashishta gave us the 3 levels of Sankalpa. See, one's in earth, one's in heaven, and one's in the intellect. Mind and intellect. So that's why these conjunctions begin to bring together certain quadruplets that come from a set of quintuplications that are all put together by triputis. See that if you look into Western mathematics, there's no secret there. There's no mysticism there. If you look into numbers in the East, that's where real mysticism happens. Because you find out, like he found out, everything's based on sets of 5s. I think 5 is a very important number all of a sudden. Like the Star of David, see, all things spiritual have some sort of five tips to them, or 5 points. And I see that there are 5 5s basically inside of me. 5 senses, 5 elements, 5 senses and 5 elements, tanmatras in the dream, and a 5-fold mind. That's called the 24, 25, or sometimes 26 cosmic principles if you add in the soul to the mix. So that's how everything came out. Everything comes back in by sets of 5s, and each one supports the next one, and each one dissolves back into the last one. Depends on if you're talking about evolution or involution. And this is going on with every breath, and this is going on every 24 hours with your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. This is going on every 80 to 100 years with your birth, life, and death. And it's going on in every age. As worlds are vomited forth, regurgitated, and taken back in and dissolved. And that's really the only thing that happens. It's the only game going on. If you get involved in all the details and vexing details, then you're lost. Up a creek without a paddle. As the Scottish or Irish say, you're fecked. See? But what about if you want to slim it down? You want to narrow the field. Narrow it down to 5s, you see. And then down to 4s and 3s and so forth. You begin to come toward oneness. See, that's the real mysticism in numbers, is how they work cosmologically. So you begin to slim it all down to a field. See, like Gita, Krishna says in the Gita, a field. There's the kshetra and there's the kshetragya, the field and its knower. And he lists this sets of 5s. One time he puts it in sets of 8, 5 elements plus the 3-fold mind. So all of these things are to become aware of, and when you become aware of them, you open up the cosmic vision. And you do it by principles of fives, facts known to everyone. Funny, all of this is known to everyone now, that there are 5 elements, 5 senses, but they're not thinking about them. They're not meditating on them. Every day, if it takes that, they're just taking them for granted. They're enjoying them. Then they're suffering them. Enjoy through the eyes, then suffer from the eyes, and you can't see anymore. It's all just built into the package. Then it's just a matter of time before it comes back on you in another form. So, like the 5 forms of grasping the object I just mentioned. What about just letting it all go and looking into connections and seeing what the origin of objects are? If you did that, then you'd be like Nagarjuna and the Buddhist schools and so forth. Oh, I see it's all shunyata, it's all empty. The Mahamudra, Tibetan Buddhism, it's all empty. And when you know it's all empty, what's left to grasp onto? And so this is a way of letting go of everything external and going back to the stimulator of the tree of all of this. Holy Mother used to say there in Calcutta when she was living, late 1800s, early 1900s, that she saw people that were attached to a dented tin pot. And they couldn't let go of it. That was their main possession, and that was their only possession. They had an absolute attachment to this dented, kind of rusting tin pot. Talk about the corrosive rust in the mind. Couldn't let go of that. You see, it was like on their mind all the time. Well, if you're impoverished, it might be sort of understandable, but it also might be understandable why you might want to just kick the thing away and say, impoverished or not, I'm the Atman. Atman never comes and goes, never thinks, always knows. It's a line out of the poem. So there you have, in a sort of roundabout way, these 4 conjunctions, and this 5th one here, great conjunction, is all around the self. And back in those times, they weren't making such a great distinction between the individual self and the indivisible self, the ego and the Purusha. They just thought pretty much it's the same thing in different levels. So it's just that if the ego becomes unripe, then it becomes averse to Atmic things, and that's a problem. That's suffering. But if the ego just lives as an individual, but knows about its indivisible self, then what's the difference? You've got the self as the self in all. It's the same self in the individual as it is in the indivisible. So forgetfulness, or if you want to put it in the opposite way, recognition or remembrance is the name of the game. You remember that everything's connected. And it gained a little popularity, this idea of everything being interconnected, and we could call that the New Age in America right now. They like the idea of everything being connected. But who's the master of the unconnected? Who's the great teacher of connections? The oldest one, even before Patanjali, would be Lord Buddha. He called it pratitya samutpata. It was that everything is connected. And that's where we've left it. Oh boy, everything's connected. That makes me much happier than all this stuff going on out there that I'm polluting the environment and I'm being insensitive to the 5 elements and to other people. That's just all scattered mind and scattered thought, scattered action. So I'm much better off thinking everything's connected. So then you've taken one step in that you're connected with nature. Like Ramakrishna pulling the hyacinth plant, over the lake. He's got this, reaches down, says, watch this, to his disciple, and he pulls this one little creeper coming out of the lake, and the whole plant moves across the surface of the lake towards him. And he turns to his disciple and says, see, just like that, under the surface, everything's connected. Beautiful. I mean, that's the Buddha 2,500 years later, giving pratitya samutpata out to a disciple. But What hasn't been said yet is that it's not a good thing that everything's connected. It's not the highest thing. You don't want to be connected with nature. That's what's not being said. And I'll make myself unpopular by saying it. I do this a lot. I don't have thousands of followers. Neither did Ramakrishna when he was living, or Christ when he was alive. Not that I'm comparing myself to them. But it's the same self and all, and it's the same Dharma that's being handed out. So what's being said is that you don't want to be one with nature. Don't end with that conclusion. Oh, everything's interconnected. Great, you see. Because you haven't yet known that if you're connected with nature, you're connected with birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death, because that's what nature is all about. That's the downside of nature. Is there an upside to nature? Beautiful sunrises and sunsets and lakes and oceans and pleasure crafts and food, hopefully good food. All of this is material for refinement. See? Food, mixed bag. If I can take refined food, good, you see. But I have to make that choice, and I can't have desire for bad food. I can't have a generation or generations of fast food going on, because I'm taking one of the very basic conjunctions and polluting it. Upper jaw, lower jaw, speech, tongue, taste, food. I mean, you can start adding everything connected into these conjunctions. So he wants to give you 5 of them, because these are what the rishis at the time meditated on and said, these are the 5 great conjunctions the way we see them in this age, at this time. If you meditate on each one of them, then bring them together, take them apart, look at them, bring them back together, all of a sudden, as you took them apart, all your problems went away. But when you put them back together, you realized you were the Atman, that all of it had come out of you, because nobody else can put them together and take them apart but you. You're the great stimulator of the tree of existence. You are doing this. It's a matter of whether it's my mind that's in charge, my ego's in charge, or if my Atman is in charge, isn't it? My mind and ego gets in charge, we have bad days. I suffer. I fall off the equilibrium of yoga. But if my Atma is in charge, I have weeks and weeks of where are you aiming? I'm aiming at the target. I'm aiming at the body of the fish. The next archer, where are you aiming? I'm aiming at the eye of the fish. See? So you've got 2 archers there who are different calibers of archer, you see. Finally he goes to his best student, where are you aiming? My arrow's already in the fish. That's the Supreme Being, you see. The drawing of the arrow, the aiming, the shooting, the wondering whether I'm going to hit it or not, all the problems, am I going to miss, am I going to become shamed because I can't hit it, I'm not a good archer. All that stuff just goes away when your arrow's already in the fish, you see. That's the certainty of Atmagyan. That's the absolute courage of your convictions, as they say in the West. And you walk around with that every day and with every breath. You see, every meal you take. So the arrow's already in the fish is this. It's not this. See, because if I come up to you and I have to go like this, then you went away, I thought you to be a fool. See? You're part of nature, or you're out of mind, out of sight, out of mind. So I saw you again, I went, oh. But you could leave Buddha like this, go away for a while, come back, he's still sitting like this. See? The beauty, the absolute perfection of divine reality at all times and all things, it doesn't change. Everything else changes. Even everything good changes. See? So this is why he would sing a stotram like that, talk about vomiting out the 3 worlds and talking about Brahman is divided or undivided. Well, for a person who doesn't know that Brahman's undivided, who thinks it's divided, then you have to come down a step and say, It's undivided, my dear. And that's Dharma, that's teachings. But that's not the level of self-knowledge yet, where you never had to deign or descend to have to say anything like that. That's why Buddha stayed silent after nirvana, right? He stayed silent. They couldn't get him out of his silence for days. And they were saying, please tell us what you experienced. You've obviously changed. You're shining with light. You have an aura, you see. What happened? Then flash ahead 2,000 years, you've got Sri Krishna. What happens in your samadhi? Oh, I feel like I was a salt doll when I walked into an ocean. That's what happened. He finally figured out some ways of saying it. My arrow was already in the fish all the time, even when I was born, even when I lived, even when I died. It never changed. You make yourself absolutely sure, certain of this, with a certainty that's beyond denial, beyond doubt, and untenable and unacceptable to think otherwise. My teacher used to say, that's untenable, it's unacceptable. He would stand up there, he'd be indignant if you thought otherwise. What's wrong with you? You're falling into mental disease. The first signs of mental disease aren't, slobbering and slavering and speaking gobbledygook. First signs of mental disease is you're not in these conjunctions anymore. You've forgotten the most important things in your life. You're even born in families thinking that you're different than your brothers and sisters, and never being told that it's the same Atman in all of you. So if one works for the highest good, the other will benefit. But instead it's competition, isn't it? And that's unhealthy competition. There are certainly forms of healthy competition, but even those will go away for an avadut, or for a seer, or for a knower of Brahman. Why compete? What am I competing against? Who am I to compete? In fact, let's just put it, who am I? There are verses in Bhaja Govindam that say that. Well, anyway, if we want to move on in these charts, let's just say this last bit here. One should meditate on existence, bearing in mind all these interior relations. I pulled that one line out of the Taittiriya Upanishad as a kind of conclusion. It's a lot, put in more words here and here, but basically if you can just meditate on existence, understand that is a capital E there. That is non-dual existence, true existence, reality, however you want to put that, Brahman, Allah. Then if you can meditate on that, at the same time bearing in mind all of these interior relations. So this is what the great rishis want you to do. Contemplate the Om would be one way of saying that. So he says here, meditate on the five senses, the five pranas, then contemplate Om, which is Brahman. It's the eternal term of compliance, is how we've put that into English in the Ramakrishna order. It's the eternal term of compliance, Om. If you say Om, you're saying this already. So if you don't have hands or arms anymore, you're just sort of an androgynous being or something. You're just a realized self that doesn't move anymore. Then when they come to you, just say Om. It's the eternal term of compliance. Just like you're acknowledging everything is the Word. And the Word is in God, and the Word was God, or is God. I'm presenting this as a Vedantic level of teaching of sadhana. I mean, we say about Vedanta that there's really no outer practice. Do you see them doing much? You could watch a Vedantist all day. Say, you didn't do sadhana today. Yeah, I was doing sadhana all day. Because this person didn't go and sit and do a bunch of stretches, and you didn't see him huffing and puffing his lungs. You didn't even see him maybe even pick up a book. It was just one being. See? Where's your sadhana? All of this is sadhana. You know? It's all inside. The purification, the refinement, the transformation, if it happens, is all going on in the mind. And that's because nothing goes on in it. My true self is the witness, pure and perfect. It doesn't have to move or think or go anywhere or come from somewhere. Time, space exist in it. It doesn't exist in them. So therefore, I'm just holding this one stationary position all the time, as if I'm breathless. That's why you do become breathless when you go into samadhi. It's called kumbhaka. When you're shocked, you become breathless, isn't it? Shamkrishna used to say, a man fired the gun for the first time. He was breathless for seconds. It shocked him so much. Well, he's using that as an analogy to seeing God. For a brief glimpse of God will shock a person. God means themselves. They don't know yet that they just saw the great self. So they have a word for it. God or gods or visions or blisses or things. The byproducts of spiritual life. But what they really saw, if they could make it into a great connection or a great conjunction, concentrate it, distill it, bring it right down to a laser-like beam, that's when they saw Brahman for the first time. They got shocked. So they were breathless. Somebody walks up to you and says, oh, do you know that person up the street? That old Japanese man, he passed away. Oh, that's too bad. But if someone comes up the street and says, guess what? Your father just died. You're shocked. You become breathless. You can't breathe for a while. So those are all ways the master used to tell us that when you see that divine reality, it'll bring you up short. Let's see if you have a habit of brooding. You won't brood for those seconds that you just got shocked. So doesn't it behoove you then to move back to that breathless state? So what's a conjunction for that? Let's bring together the 5 pranas. So let's really meditate on the 5 senses and the 5 pranas, right? So I must make the 5 pranas and bring them together in my understanding. So I have to take them apart. There's a prana that powers my lungs. There's a prana that digests my food. There's a prana that's everywhere and everything. There's a prana that causes my mind to soar. If I can get a hold of that, it's going to be a good thing. See? So I meditate on all 5 pranas. Then you read Vivekananda, he said, it's really one prana in 5 forms. So all of a sudden, the conjunctions become oneness, right? Oh, I can't forget that as I took apart the 5 pranas and took them each separately, all that time I was doing that, I should have remembered that they're really one force that I'm looking at. See? I forgot that. And that's a big problem. In the world and in philosophy and in spirituality, people forget as they study. It's basically what we're saying here. We forget all these connections while we experience them. As soon as you become the experiencer, you forget all the connections, it seems. It's not ideal. And it's not just the art of oneness that suffers, Advaita in the world. It's also you that suffers in this world of variegation that becomes far-flung. So it's hard to bring things back together. Patanjali talks about that iron filings around a magnet, right? The magnet lost its power, so they just stay all around. You take the magnet, replace it with a real magnet, they all snap to, you see. So the power of your mind, it's lost its power to make these conjunctions. It's just sagging and old and wet, rusty. Dip it in a salt solution, put it back, watch all these problems in your life, snap to, you see. They really come back to one problem, just like the 5 pranas come back to one prana, don't they? I mean, I have that experiences even when I'm putting together these teachings and these charts. Encounter great philosophical problems. I change my thinking, all a minute everything becomes fun again. It only became disparate like that because my mind was thinking that this was hard, that this might not be possible. or maybe this is a wrong track, or anything. But the minute I take a break, walk away, come back with a new mind, I see it's all one. It's all possible. Anything is possible. That's what the yogini has to be thinking all the time. And it happens the same at philosophical levels. It will happen the same in everyday life. You can make all your problems just into one problem and be much less invaded by it. Much easier to get over it. Lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, aversion, attachment, egotism, clinging to life. Whatever the problem is, whether there's a klesha, an antaryaya, or the 6 passions or the 8 fetters, whatever, the minute you start conjuncting them and bring them down just to one, like my ego, that would be sadhana to this rishi. Now, in my mind now, I'm doing this all in my mind. See? Before I had 6 passions to deal with. Now I just have one. See what I mean? It happens at all levels. If you can make that movement of your mind to be that magnet again and pull everything back to just one consideration, how much more easy it's going to be to get over that, if it is a problem. So people who have done this, even in daily life, people of the world, you see, just innocent people have come up with that saying, haven't they? There are no problems. There's just solutions. See, that's like a New Age saying, isn't it? So, you can't have that if everything is spread so wide. It's when you bring it all back to a conjunction. So I'm just saying, using that as a metaphor, the same thing happens in your daily sadhana. Bring it all back just to one consideration. You'll probably find out, hello, Mr. Ego. Hello, Mr. Non-Self. What are you doing to me? There's this great self. I want to introduce you to him. See? So that's a solution, isn't it? I mean, you bring it down to one, and then you merge that one into Brahman. That one is Om. The universal term of compliance. Nicely put. See? So I'm kind of going on and on about conjunctions because, like I say, it's a Vedantic sadhana, you might say. There are very few of them. Like I say, Vedanta is doing a sadhana in here, so you don't see it a lot. Buddhists are like that too. High-minded people are like that. Like my teacher, I never saw him meditating. He had us meditate, and then he'd come down and join us for the last few minutes. So, I mean, in his 80s and 90s, everything had become meditation to him. We realized that finally. Who did he learn that from? His teacher, Holy Mother, who told him, does God exist only when eyes are closed and cease to exist when eyes are open? That's a question. Rhetorical maybe, but worthy of contemplation. No, as the answer comes back resoundingly. No, God exists at all times, whether eyes are open or whether they're closed. So he heard her say that, he believed it, he proved it for himself, and he lived that way then, for the rest of his days, all the way into his 90s. He wasn't sitting around on a park bench with newspaper blowing over his rounded shoes, feeling sorry for himself. He was a swami, a monk, a yogi, a knower of Brahman, a jivan mukta, right there in his 90s. And he would speak about it when he couldn't hear anymore. From the podium we saw him. And then they'd have to help him down off the podium. You see, couldn't see very well, couldn't speak very well. So what about those senses? See, he meditated on the senses. If he had have just relied on the 5 senses, he wouldn't have been able to do that in his old age. He didn't rely upon them. He knew about inner senses. He knew about the connections of the senses back to the mind. He went back to the mind, did what Holy Mother told him to, and then ended up his days as bright and brilliant as he was when he was in his young days. Probably more so because, you need time to mature. If there's any efficacy at all to the health regimens that are going around, or to Hatha Yoga, it's this, that you get longevity, and lots of the yogis look down their nose at that. Oh, you just want to live long so you can have more pleasures. But if you want to live long so that you have more time to mature spiritually, okay, we'll give you that. Eat good food, live as long as you want. That's why the Upanishads say a man should live 100 years. The Chinese scriptures say that. You should live 100 years. But it's not in pleasure and only. I mean, your pleasure might turn exquisite as your mind refines. But the human being needs time for it to mellow and mature in spiritual terms. If its life is truncated, then that's the real meaning of the term. I was thinking of it earlier today, that it's a shame that they didn't get to live their full life. Their life was cut short. See, if your life is cut short, the only real tragedy of that is you didn't have time to mellow your spirituality. There's no tragedy to you having your life cut short if all you had to look forward to was a life of pleasures. Those would probably put you in a worse position because you would suffer from those pleasures. And if you have lifetimes of suffering and pleasure, what did Sri Ramakrishna say about that? It makes you believe that the world is real, that Maya is real. So you see, and people in their naivete say, oh, that's so bad that the baby died young, or that's so bad that that person got their life cut short in their youth. What's so bad about it? Number one, they're a birthless, deathless soul. Number two, they can have as many births and as many lives as they want. Number three, they want to have a life that, if it is long, is spent in freeing themselves from the process of embodiment. And so these are the truths of the Dharma. They can't be compromised, and they can't be understated, and they really can't be disagreed with if you have a kind of mind and intellect that has listened to great souls like this. From Buddha back to Lord Vashishta and before, and from Buddha forward to Sri Ramakrishna in this present age, these are the beings you'll listen to, and then you will yourself not only make conjunctions, you will be yourself the great conjunction. You'll be the final conjunction. You'll be the one who's in charge of the many. And that's how we will leave this class in its first half. And we'll come back and begin to look at some of these other teachings in the sadhana part of our presentation. So here we will take 15 minutes for the live streaming audience. Here we are going to take some pure food and pure water and call it prasad, and then we will rejoin you. So thank you for your kind attentions. Om. welcome back after the first half is concluded. We've been sitting here after having some prasad at the SRV ashram on the big island of Hawaii, which you're all welcome to come. In January we have a retreat here, and we have people coming from Europe and Iceland and various places, West Coast, to join us for teachings on precipitous ascent into higher awareness, we've been calling it. And we meet here every Sunday, as you know, those of you who watch the live streaming. We are gathering more momentum over time, getting more hits on our classes, and it's something that is an underground river, this deep Dharma, deep down Dharma. And so it's something that people in the West particularly will have to get used to by stops and starts, you might say, or by increments. Take a little bit in, digest it. And we know that, or I should say I know that I'm giving 3-hour-long classes with a lot of teachings in them, and we've often called that the sponge method. There's the sponge method and there's the sieve method. The sieve method just trickles down some, and you get a chance to take that back and think about it. That can actually go in conjunction, speaking about conjunctions, which we just talked about, with the sponge method, where you just absorb everything, whether if you don't understand it right away, you just let the mind soak it in. You sit in the holy company with the Dharma as a Sangha, the triple gem, and you just open up and let it all soak in the mind and not worry about the thicket of creeping vines. Sometimes they say in Zen, too many teachings, you see. But you just let it absorb. And then when you go home, you can squeeze out the sponge and take those things out of your notes or out of your mind that really impressed you, because Mother was there in you, listening to the teachings, and she made you pay special attention to certain ones. Aha moments, they say. So those are sort of two methods that aren't necessarily antagonistic of each other, but do happen to the student. So anyway, I am aware that 3 hours is a long time, even in 2 halves. They're breaking those up on the YouTube so you can see them in 2 halves at a time. As one person who came just today, in fact, just comes every Sunday for one half of the class and leaves the second half, because that's as much as is absorbable in one day for that person. They want to go home and just work on that. So however one takes it, the end result should be this, that we do take it in and we therefore benefit from it. And it's much, much better, of course, than not ever coming at all or listening to it at all, never hearing it. So in that spirit and in that vein, then, I've opened up 2 more charts in the second half to look at. And of course, my spiritual eyes or philosophical eyes are always bigger than my philosophical stomach. So I know we won't get to all of them. We have the rest of this class and next week to look at sadhana. We'll end with the 2 special yogas of Holy Mother, Jnanadaya Yoga and Manobuddhi Yoga, 2 special yogas that she has proposed in this day and age. In the meantime here, though, I wanted to call the attention to these 2, especially this one, which was one of the most favorite charts of all my students when I put it out. Golden Rules for Sadhana and Transformation of Mind. You don't recognize it because it has been given a facelift. This is called The Funeral behind it, where you have all these people with heaven behind it, a person having passed away, soul going to another level of kingdoms of heaven within, as we would say, and how the soul ascends to different lands and realms, and how people back on earth necessarily talk about it and everything as if, does it happen, or is there a God, and questions like that come up. Of course, in Vedanta, we just put it into a final dindima. Dindima means an absolute conclusion that existence is God. It's not whether God exists or God doesn't exist. It's not a question you ask. You just make an affirmation. Existence is God. And you see it just turning it around like that just takes all the problem away from it. It's sort of like Vivekananda's way of teaching Advaita Vedanta. Sometimes he would say to us in the late 1800s, God is not in the world. And that would be kind of a shocking thing to the dualistic and fundamentalistic religious people who were Westerners who were there. But then he would follow up quickly and say, the world is in God. So at first you'd say, well, you'd think, oh, this is another one of those nihilistic perspectives, like Buddhism is supposedly supposed to be, or Samkhya Yoga even. But then you find out that there is a God. He's saying that the world is in it, that it isn't in the world. So it gives you some discernment around, and you think about it a little bit coarse to your sensibilities, because you think you really want God to be in nature. Everyone does. And the beauty they see there and the things that happen there, oh, that's all God, right? But then the horrors of nature, you just kind of push that under a carpet. Oh, that's not God, you see. So it doesn't quite make sense. So it's much more sensible to think all of this is just nature and mind in conjunction. Objects, attachments, desires, pleasures, pains. This is called Maya. And it's not the real world. And then there's this Brahman that's underlying it. That's how he would explain that God is not in the world is in God. And it wasn't a hell of a lot different than Christ saying, birds have nests, foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head here. And these teachings they call them negative teachings, because the positive teachings, there are some of those, all is Brahman and so forth, yay. But you have these negative teachings that are very ascetic, that is, they're acid-like. And they're meant to bring you up short, breathless, like we were saying in the first half. And make you think and stop and think. Why not stop and think? Or maybe stop thinking. First stop and think, then stop thinking later. But you need to put a pause on these conventional runs of the mind that you're habituated towards. I get up every morning and I think the same way. Oh, this has got to stop. Why? Because after 40 or 50 years, I see it didn't get me very far. And I'm still laboring with the same problems of my mind and the world. I haven't transcended anything. I haven't renounced anything. Remember last week we had the teaching on the 4 stages of renunciation sitting in this room. First objects outside, then objects inside, then relationships. Finally, even knowledge you renounce and go beyond. So there are steps to this process of, call it soul's evolution, if you will. You should note them, just like you would note a conjunction, like we were talking about, and become aware of awareness, and become conscious of consciousness. So when we say existence is God, that's kind of what, in spiritual circles, rather than just in, say, intellectual circles, or Western philosophical circles and so forth, where debating and argument sort of takes a field. That's even the same sometimes in religion. Even with monasticism in India, they argue. But when they argue on purpose. They already know the truth. They already have heard the seers. They've already heard the Indian seers declare the truth. They accept that. But the individual mind is not clear on that truth yet. So they argue in order to get rid of those problems. I mean, Sri Ramakrishna used to have Girish Ghosh and Narendra, Swami Vivekananda, argue together. Say, I want to hear you two argue. And Girish was always coming from the standpoint of, oh, Ishvara, devotion to God, God with form. And Naren was always coming from the fact, oh, that's all nonsense, non-duality is the only truth, you know. And so Sri Ramakrishna would love to put these two souls together and just watch and listen to what comes out. And they each made their points, and they each actually walked away respecting each other all the time. I mean, Swami Vivekananda used to respect Girish so much, and all the other monastic disciples came to respect Girish and consider him kind of one of the heart of the householder devotees that was there. So you have this in all walks, I'm saying, and pondering it is a matter of pause for thought. The worldly people have the pause that refreshes. But you want to have pause for thought and pause for intelligence. It's there, just pause and let it come forward. It's like a conjunction. It's like a manifestation or an effect of a conjunction. But you have to make that first move against the mind, against the ego. And say, oh, you're not in control anymore. Guess what? Here's a new commander. You see, you're fired. Bring in some new blood, as it were. So when we talk about that, there are those phases for sadhana, but this really puts together some very nice golden rules for sadhana that have come out of my own thinking process. This isn't in a list anywhere that you'll find, although scattered through the various philosophies you'll find these things, but I brought them all together sort of for a this age or this day and time kind of teaching. When we think in Vedantic circles today, what it would be to follow a set of golden rules. You'll find it very interesting that there's almost stripped of anything about morality or ethics in it. It's very much just towards the Dharma and spiritual practice. You're already moral, you're already ethical, and if you're not, you've heard it enough. You have to hear something like morality and ethics, thou shalt not kill, don't murder, that kind of thing, and sit with it for a while till you finally actually act on it. It's not like somebody hears this and all of a sudden says, I think I'll stop murdering, mob boss, or like one of the great thieves in India that became a seers. You hear stories about that all the time. It's not like they said, I think I'll just give up right away. They probably sit with it and think, well, maybe it's right, I shouldn't kill. That's probably better. I think I'll decide not to do that. But in the term between the time when they heard not to kill and they decided not to kill, they probably committed 5 or 6 murders still. It was just their old nature going on. See? So there's time again for the soul to mature in this, and there's no loss in any of this yoga, Krishna says in the Gita. There is no loss in any of the practice. If you even practice an ounce of it, that's positive gain. It's like Buddha saying, drops in the Dharma bucket, you see. If I just gather a few here and there, a few meditations every week and so forth, that I end up with some substance in the bucket of my mind. So it would be the same in these other cases I'm mentioning. So golden rules are something to follow in Vedanta that you'll find be very dharmically oriented, maybe even sort of transcendent, even before the fact. It's like, I'm starting to do sadhana, but let's read this again. In order to benefit by sadhana, spiritual practice, 2 great points are to be reflected upon at the outset. First, it is helpful to know that spiritual practice will not net one freedom or enlightenment, which is more of a matter of grace married to right timing. Freedom is indigenous to the soul, thus transformation is in and of the mind, not the true self, which does not require any regimen of purification. So that's point 1 of the view, you might say, of Vedanta, is that, and Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna used to say that too, sadhana, mantra, like for instance, will not get you enlightenment, but it will prepare the mind so that it knows it's enlightened. So if you could say, well, I'm already enlightened and not do sadhana. So that's a big problem with pseudo-Advaita, I would call it nowadays in the West, that they hear these great teachings from Swami Vivekananda first, and later on Ramana Maharshi, and a few beings like that who came on the scene. But then they say, I'm already perfect, and they want to snap and jump right to that, and they haven't really either done any sadhana or completed the sadhana that they were in the middle of when they heard that, you see. So that's a risk and a danger, I'd say. So know first that you enter into this practice with a pure self, because the self is indigenous. Freedom is indigenous to the soul. The self is ever perfect. It does not need a regimen of purification. Sadanga natunaiva shuddham. Guru padesha natunaiva shuddham. Mano vinasha natunaiva shuddham. That's the great saying of the Advaita again, when he says, the mind is not, the soul is not made pure by 6-limbed yoga, sadanga yoga. It's not made pure by Guru Padesham, bowing and touching the Guru's feet. It's not made pure by stopping the waves of the mind, mano vinasham. It's already pure. It's already pure. So the soul is pure and perfect. It doesn't need your guilt. It doesn't need your self-effort. It doesn't need anything, which is pretty much what the whole first half was about, wasn't it? This position. You hold this all the time. You never have to do this. If you have to do this, then you've fallen down to the level of sadhana. Oh, good. So you forgot. Now remember, is basically it. You never become a sinner or eternally sinful. There's no black mark on your soul. You forgot. You committed some errors. You come back together. Even Jesus evinced this amongst so-called sinners when he was living. Now, that's point one. I hope we all understand that very good, that you kind of break it into two parts there. It doesn't, sadhana does not give you or grant you enlightenment because the soul's already perfect, but it will prepare your mind by removing impurities. Then the mind will become no mind, or original mind, or pure mind, and it will see the Atman. In other words, it'll know that it's one with the Atman. Just like, there's a big show going on, let's just draw the curtain open. So if you left the curtain closed, there's a beautiful show going on, you see. And you never see it. So you just get up, draw the curtain, go back and sit down and watch the show. And that's how ignorance goes away, and how false superimposition gets destroyed. Vivarta, they call it. Now, second point, all effort is to be accomplished as a mental practice first and foremost, rather than merely physically, since the origins of delusion lie in the mind. So you can do thousands of breathing exercises and hundreds and thousands of asana, hatha yoga asanas, will never purify you or get you enlightenment. So sadhana won't do that, so what to speak of these lower practices, that are all just requisites or prerequisites. So those two things have to be realized about this list, you see, before you start into this list. Now let's look at the list so that we make some ground. This word samyak darshana is very reminiscent of the the Eightfold Path of Lord Buddha, called Ashtanga Marga. It's a nice term that's also been used before Buddha in Yoga Vasishta's time. Lord Vasishta's time. So it means really proper and preeminent view and attitude. So we've often said clarification and intensification, right? Those two words are very important. So to clarify a thing first and then intensify is what you want. You don't want to intensify first if it's not clear, right? So you're not clear about something, you just bull ahead and you say, I'm going to do this practice. Like say, even on a nominal level, my body isn't very strong, but I'm going to fast. Probably be better to make your body strong than to do some fasting, because you'll get much more out of the austerity. Well, it's the same on all levels. You don't jump in. Fools, the wise was saying, fools jump in where wise men fear to tread, or something like that. So, in spirituality, you don't want to be a fool like that. And so in this case, then, you're going to make sure that your view of the thing, your attitude is right before you do practice. Clarification first, then intensity. So let's look at some of them under that auspice. Checklist there, you see, we've checked off all the things that we want. Well, what am I going to do? Sandilya Vidya. Identification with the source while keeping relations with the world. So, how many of us have not found ourselves in the need to do that, or that necessity? There are very few people that can just keep identification with the source and forget the world. Monks, whatever. Even the monks nowadays aren't able to do that, because Swami Vivekananda set a new precedent for monks to serve the world. So, no matter where you go, this is going to be a valuable rule. Move on. Artha Shunya, clear comprehension of the nature of motiveless practice, which has been described up here already. Right? You don't have a motive, or they call this, even in yoga you have this. So, motive-oriented, goal-oriented sadhana would be the expression, is not necessarily very good. Unless the goal is a single goal, enlightenment, then that's okay. See, but you've got this goal-oriented sadhana, like say, I'm going to get enlightened, but it's running against the grain of the truth that you're already free. So that's not clarification, is it? So you start intensifying yourself in that mode. Try to get, you don't know, you're not comprehending clearly that motives of, that practice that has motive to it could run awry. See? You could fail and then fall and then develop a problem, a failure, father of yoga. Then start to diss yourself and say, oh, I don't like myself because I fail all the time. And all of this is happening in Maya, and your true self is saying, what an idiot. You're standing back there saying, you're perfect. You know, what are you going through that for? Do I have to wait another 12-year cycle for you to get it together? So, snap two. Commenting briefly on each of these so that we can move forward, because I tend to go on and on about things. Artha shunya then. Shunya really means emptiness in that one sense. Here it means just free of any motive. You just don't have any motive for your practice. You just do it, which is actually kind of a good mantra, not just for tennis shoes or wherever you find it on billboards. But just do it means just do your sadhana and let's see what happens. And that's really the perspective of Lord Kapila, Patanjali, the fathers of Samkhya and yoga, really just said, you know, you might not know what God is, you don't even have to believe in God, just do this practice and see what happens. I was saying in the first half, watching J. Krishnamurti talk toward the end of his life. And so every time they ask him a question, and he always says, he thinks about it for a while and says, why ask me? And then somebody asks him a question, and then he says, well, I'm not saying I know anything. None of us know anything. We're just here to explore. So he really takes the ego apart, even in himself, right on stage there. And he kind of, you could say it's a concession for people. Well, if I say that I'm as in ignorance as all of you are, and I'm as confused as all of you are, then that's going to be good because we'll all be one in confusion, you know. But why is he the teacher sitting up there saying things if he doesn't know more than his audience does in most cases? But he's taking the perspective that behind the curtain of Maya, nobody knows a damn thing. In the body, which is Maya, with the five senses, which is Maya, with the mind that's in Maya, because Maya is name and form. And here it is, all around you. If you're the fish that knows about water, then you're better off than the fish who doesn't know about water. So existence is God. We know about existence. We don't have to worry about that anymore. We know things exist. It's not a philosophical argument anymore. We've come to that conclusion, and now we can make better conclusions as a result of those smaller conclusions. Conjunctions, bringing things together and understanding them. So very beautiful that he did that. Well, we don't know anything here behind the curtain of Maya. We're just here to explore. So let's explore, he says. And then as he explores and takes these teachings apart, you see that he knows everything. There's nothing that he can't comment on or explain to you. But if you ask him a question, if you ask anyone a question, their ego comes forward first. See, I'm asking you. And this person is saying, well, I am now answering you. Isn't that the ego? But it's not until you get into the explication of something that the ego steps back and the Atman comes forward. We would say the ego steps back and the mother comes forward. She has all knowledge. This was the secret of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He said, I open my mind and my mouth and speak, but Saraswati sits in my throat, shoving forth all the wisdom. So he was totally hands-off of the idea that he knew anything. So these are the great souls who disarm us with their seeming not knowing. Yet, when we go to them, they're full of all, the repository of all knowledge, all higher knowledge. And they've qualified themselves with it, and they live in it. They are it. I am Atma Brahma. All knowledge is mine. I am the stimulator of the tree of the universe. However you want to put that, in any given way. And so, our hands are always like this to them. Not like this, but like this, you see. Ramakrishna walks into your dreams, you're like this. He goes away, you wake up, you walk around all day like this. You go to sleep again, it comes into your dreams the next night. You're still like this. Very good, very good. It's like the Zen Buddhist saying, never get up from your pillow. There's, of course, you're going to have to get up for eating and for answering the calls of nature, as the Master used to say. But in your mind position is, I never left the pillow when I did these things. So that's this, it can be called this kind of Zen Buddhist non-duality. It can also be called mindfulness, in other forms of Buddhism that are becoming popular, Thich Nhat Hanh and so forth. It's kind of mindfulness that, you have to keep your mental posture, is how we're saying it in Vedanta. Mental asana is so important. Manasana, manas, mind, asana, position. So these are positions. Here I am explaining one maybe a little long-windedly. So let's go on to the next one. Samastachitta, grounded and unalterable stance of open-mindedness. Not narrow. Not my watch keeps the only right time, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. But I have to check this with the sundial if I want the more correct time. You can ask some other person's time would be a little different to you, and that's grounds for disagreement, argument. But we'll both go check it with the sundial, which is Shiva, the master of time, Shiva Kala. So, grounded and unalterable stance of open-mindedness. Also, alaya vijnana, positive and natural idea of universality. These two go hand in hand. If you have open-mindedness and that culminates in or complements universality, that you believe, like Sri Ramakrishna said, all religions are pathways to divine reality. That he's got this open-minded stance about them, and he also knows that that's the universal truth behind them. That there are many paths leading to one goal. The oldest statement in any scripture about that is in the Rig Veda, which itself, carbon dated, is one of the oldest scriptures of all, if not the oldest. It says, Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. There's Ekam sat, there's one truth, vipra bahuda vadanti, and many paths leading to it. One path, one truth, many paths leading to it. So there's one mountaintop, and then these paths, people are walking up it different ways. Some of those paths, trees has fallen in front of them. Not the best paths. Some are very rocky, some are straight, some are wide for lots of people to get there. But ekam sat, one truth. So this is this idea that you keep in mind in the same way that you would keep these in mind when you go in to study different religions. Probably better to take one path and study it deeply, dig one deep well, strike water. That would be proper preeminent view and attitude, wouldn't it? If you practice samyak darshana, you'd get the essence of one dharma. When you had that, then you could go to other fields like our founder Lexixen did. He was accepted amongst the Tibetans, meditated with them. He was accepted amongst the Zen Buddhists, got a Zen Buddhist name. He became a sheikh of a Sufi order of Islam, accepted among them and became a teacher of them. He was a student of Swami Nikhilananda in New York for all those years, and studied the Karika of Gaudapada. So he was able to do all of these things because he had dug one deep well with Swami Nikhilananda and Advaita Vedanta, and came out of that with this ability to cast about without danger. So this is important, these two, Samastachitta, alaya vijnana. It's even sung about quite often in some of these stotrams that we sing. Kastvam toham bhutayata kame janani kome tataha iti paribhavaya sarvam saram vishvam tvakva swapna vicharam bhaja govindam bhaja govindam bhaja govindam mudamate samprapte sanihite kale nahi nahi rakshati dhukavin karane bhaja govinda. If we were at the end. This goes on and on, one of the longest songs in history. unending tale, as they say. So basically, in this particular verse of this, which was by Shankara's devotee, Surendra, he says, "Who am I? Who are you? Whence have I come? Who is my mother? Who is my father? Inquire like this, leaving aside the entire world, which is comparable to a dream, and thus essenceless." So, talking about this idea. And then he goes on to say, "In you, in me, and everywhere as well, there is but one God. Do not get angry or become impatient. Perceive the self in all beings, and leave off ignorance, which is the cause of all difference." Couldn't put it any better, right, than that. One of Shankara's great disciples. Shankara, Govindapada, Gaudapada, that line, that lineage, more current, 500, 600, 700 AD, having been Shaivites, worshippers of Shiva, worshippers of Divine Mother, Samaya Tantrasis, and also very much in worship of Sri Krishna, which appears in some of these verses. Worship Sri Krishna, read the Gita. So these Shaivites aren't narrow, like maybe some Krishna worshippers are, or some Christ worshippers are. No narrowness in them. So you see that they have this golden rule, don't they? And then they have the second golden rule that goes hand in hand with it. So let's talk about conjunctions, you see. Very important. Now, let's go on to the final two. Prayojana is profound underlying sense of ultimate purpose. Somebody asked me once, are you ever unsure of yourself? And I say, I never doubt myself, but I check myself. I mean, how could I ever doubt myself when my teacher gave me these teachings? When Sri Ramakrishna was my great master, the paragon of universality came to me, I recognized him, I loved him, I bowed at his feet, I took him, I went to his lineage, I got initiation, I followed, I spent decades studying the Dharma that came from the Ramakrishna order. Is there any doubt in that? Is there any doubt in me? But I always find myself having to check myself, see? Because you wander the paths of the Dharma, there are some apparent contradictions in it. And they can put you off, and they can stymie you for time. Actually, it's good to cut your teeth on these. Is God with form, or is he formless? Sorry, I said he. Is he or she? Maybe it's it. See? Or, better yet, that. Just point at it and say that. You see? So all of these conundrums, these two black rocks, form and formlessness, they say Mother Durga takes them and slaps them together and smashes them into smithereens. What's left over is her divine reality. Just like he just sang right there, that's a kind of an insult to philosophy to say, to put God, Brahman in the context of divided or undivided. Why are you talking like that? It's beyond the concept of divided and undivided, and Sri Ramakrishna used to say, God is with form, God is beyond form, and God is beyond both form and formlessness, too. So when you smash those two black rocks together, what was left over was reality. And that's enlightenment as an accident. And when you're studying this, you become accident prone, as Suzuki Roshi said. So, some things about the underlying sense of ultimate purpose in you. You never should be made to doubt yourself. And if you are made to doubt yourself, check yourself. Remember, there are plenty of instances of people who are so sure of themselves, find out they were on a wrong path with a bad teacher. What about that? Well, you could say, giving it any kind of merit at all, is that they at least developed a discrimination to know what a bad path and a bad teacher is. And so hopefully they didn't give up on religion. That's the real problem. Give up on practice, because that's not good. Somebody is to blame for that. But they had the courage of their convictions here, no doubts. Then they thought, well, I just wandered off a little bit there, but I don't doubt the precepts of what the seers have told me. Beings that millions of people depend upon for their religious life. Oh, how could I doubt them? You could take anything anyone says and make it seem untrue. But in the matter of conjunctions, you should be taking all these things out of Maya that are really unreal and making them real. So that even Maya becomes real. That should be possible. It's neither real nor unreal, nor a combination of both, is how Shankara puts that in the Vivekachudamani. So you have to go there. See, when you get that high philosophically thinking. If you really want to settle doubts for all time, nothing like Jnana Yoga to do that. I said that in the first half. If any doubts in your mind, and you can't dance them away, or sing them away, or asana them away, or breathe them away, some of those things won't go away. Those are weeds in the garden that have a tenacious life in your mind, maybe for lifetimes. You got to go and pull those suckers out by the roots. And so, right view and right orientation. Let's finish it. Autsukya Puraka. Ready store of interest and inspiration. In some traditions you'd call that utsaha. Autsukya is really a variety of that word. So you have this ready store of inspiration and interest, both. When the guru sees that in a student, fine, you see. And it's not that there are older people who don't have that, but when they see the young come, bright and shining, ready to hear, and they like this, you see. Oh, let's usher these souls into this Dharma and give them their first hit, especially the authentic Dharma that's untampered with, untrammeled, untext-tortured for ages, and has the corroboration of hundreds of illumined souls behind it, not just one prophet or one seer. That's the advantage of that. Talking about people whose corroboration brought together the revealed scriptures for you, so that you don't have to do it anymore. You don't have to doubt it, and you don't have to do it, either one. I chanted that at the beginning of the class. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. What fact? That all is Brahman. And that staying in constant recognition of that is enlightenment. That fact. So you don't have to worry about this anymore when you've got the corroboration of the father of yoga, the father of Vedanta, the father of Samkhya, the father of Buddhism, and the mother of the universe, whose sons and daughters all of these are giving you this eternal Dharma, which rings of truth the minute you hear it. If it doesn't ring of truth, the problem's in here, not with the Dharma. Because you would be saying, then there's a problem with hundreds and thousands of realized souls. So you're doubting their inspection process. You're doubting their many lifetimes. So we wouldn't argue so much about the existence or non-existence of God, but we'll stand up and argue vehemently with you if you try and downsize the Vedanta Dindima, the Vedanta Siddhanta, the conclusions of these great souls who have come to us by the dozens and hundreds to proclaim this and have corroborated with each other in different systems. Yoga, Vedanta, Buddhism, Zen. You made the conjunctions everywhere else, why don't you make them in philosophy and religion too? And so that's these two again, and followed up by this three. If you know that there's something as universal religion, and you also know there's a great paragon of universality called Sri Ramakrishna that just came before you, then you should store up a ready supply of interest and inspiration. I hope I've made myself clear on that point, because we want clear, preeminent view. Now, let's go on to the next part, sentinels at the gate. As you follow these golden rules, you're sitting in elementary school right now, right? And you heard the golden rules from your first grade teacher. What to do, what not to do. So you wrote them down, took them home, your mother and father helped them. Same with spiritual life. You have these golden rules for your practice, and it's good to look back on them. Some of you maybe have already mastered them, or already have them in place, or you're working on them. Whatever the case, as you do, you have to know that there's some safeguards in you that you have to put forward. We mentioned a few of them already. Spurious teachers, bad forms of the Dharma, that kind of thing. So, sentinels at the gate here. Some of these are very individual. This one would be no pretensions, justifications, or complaints about one's status. So you have to see yourself as you are. You don't just complain about not being enlightened, or say that person is far beyond where I'll ever get to, or I'll never reach my teacher's status, or this other friend of mine who's practicing another religion seems to be farther advanced than I am, or I'm more advanced than he or she is. No pretensions about that, no justifications about it, no complaints. You accept your status, you take yourself from where you are, and you begin working. So these are things that get in the way of people's practice, these usurpers, these interlopers in your mind. These are the things you want to locate and dissolve. Sort of like being compassionate to your own mind, right? No brooding about them. So this is kind of what will happen. You say, well, I'm better than that person. I have a better religion and a better path and a better guru. That's a pretension, you see. So then later on it starts bugging you, you see. Because that person says something that you didn't know, maybe. Maybe I'm not so much better than they are, you see. So all of a sudden you have some doubt lodged in your mind. So it'd be better never to have dealt with that. No pretensions, no justifications for your status, and no complaints about it. Number 2, no shifting of blame to any external circumstance or outer agent. And so these sentinels are very deep ones. So in this case, the sentinel is standing there, as it were, and it's noticing that you're shifting blame to the devil, say, or to your mother. I mean, pick anything you want. They're responsible, not me. See? And or how about this? It's God's fault. I prayed to him, but he didn't send me grace or gifts, so it's his fault, not mine. So this is a pretense, number 1. It's also a shifting of blame to an external agent outside of yourself. If you were to follow philosophy, you'd find out that God is yourself. So if you're going to blame anyone, blame yourself. Either blame your lower self or even blame your higher self. Either way, it'll end up to your highest good. If you stand up and take responsibility. And this is the difference between a path that depends on grace and predestination and a path that depends on karma. My teacher used to say that quite a bit. There are some paths that just depend on grace and predestination, but you might have to wait several thousand years for grace. Because what am I still doing here, suffering in the body, praying to God, and never saw Jesus once yet, for example? Or when I prayed to those 200,000 Hindu gods, and none of them really came up to help me, you see. So what about that? And I'm still here doing the same thing lifetime after lifetime, worshiping my ancestors. So I began to reason it out, right? It's untenable, it's unacceptable, as we say, to go that. But what if you depended on karma? What if you thought, well, maybe I did all of this to myself, and I'm continuing to do this all to myself. Oh, and guess what? There's some teachings in Vedanta and Buddhism that connect together the links of how a person conditions their mind over time that causes them to create more karmas, to be born in another body, maybe an inferior birth, or with the same problems they had lifetime. And here's the solution, the Dharma that they give me for it all. How about if I shift my perspective to that and decide to take all the blame myself? It wasn't my mother's fault. What if she was a bad mother? Get over it. See? Who was it that was at fault for the man being born blind? They asked Jesus. See? Was it the father, the parents, the mother, or was it the soul himself? And Jesus said neither. He didn't believe in praise and blame. He didn't believe in fault. He believed in karma. And they took all of that out of the Bible. References to karma and reincarnation in the 4th century. That's what they say. The council came together, see, took it out. Well, it's you sow what you reap. What happened? That we didn't take that deep and understand it, you see. And you reap what you sow, both ways. So we have to look into karma because great souls believed in it. And if they did, they found out, yes, they had some work to do on themselves, number one. But number two, freedom did not depend on anyone but themselves. They got themselves bound. They got themselves free. If you talk about devil, it's probably an illusion or a form in your mind. If you talk about God, it doesn't exist. Not in the realm of praise and blame. Jesus didn't believe in it, so would God believe in it? So you go beyond dualities, this praise and blame, good and bad, virtue and vice. You have to go beyond them. That's one way of approaching this teaching. So again, without getting too much going in it, don't shift blame to outer agents. Look for the source of that problem and you'll find that it's probably in your own mind. And you need to adjust the view. Just the view. Like I said earlier in the first half, you can run into problems. Bring it all together into one. Adjust it. Transcend it. All of a sudden you're flowing again. Everything will flow then. Third bullet point. No assigning of fault to any deity such as God, gods, demons, or devil. No assigning of fault. It's almost like the one we just studied, but it's becoming more specific. And you could probably add in there your parents, your ancestors, and so forth, or your friends, what they did to you. And just get free of all that. That whole morass of fault finding. You know what Holy Mother said about it. Fault finding was one of the things she really called out in the problem amongst the people that she was around and the Hindus, you see. Don't find fault with yourself. Don't find fault with others. Instead, find fault with yourself. Find out where the problem is. So she's giving that as an advice, but this is a rule. This is almost a sentinel at the gate that's telling you this, or you could say she's the sentinel at the gate that's telling you this. Going on, no citing of the occurrence of luck with regard to the outcomes of one's life. Sorry, all of you who believe in luck. Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Swami Vivekananda, and other great souls would not put their eggs in that basket at all. It's like luck and serendipitousness, randomness of things. It's not that there aren't things that seem to be the cause of luck and randomness. You can go into random thoughts of the mind. You could say, if I hadn't have taken that 2 steps that way, I wouldn't have broken my leg. And that's after the fact you're thinking about that. If I had have walked the other way. So there are many things that are random in the mind, possible occurrences. But if you have the right perspective, you'll be guided. And if you don't, you'll suffer. So the thing Holy Mother couldn't understand is why you didn't, when you suffered, turn around and rectify the situation. So believing in luck would be casting your lot in a very risky atmosphere. Believing in karma would be better, and believing in God as your guide would be the best of all. I am Atma Brahma. Infallible guide. You see, I got a postcard from the Pope the other day, and he was a picture of him on the front, and then there was infallibly yours, he had written. See? That's a joke. So you want this infallible guide inside of yourself. No vague or foggy belief in the random or serendipitous nature of things and events. That's a sentinel at the gate for you. And this list comes out of watching the Western New Age, so-called New Age, fall victim to things like luck and serendipitousness and random acts of kindness and that kind of thing. It ends up on your bumper stickers and in the windows of your cars and various things. But God doesn't come onto your bumper, and God doesn't come into bowling alleys and football fields. You'll find God inside of yourself, and your mind should reflect that. If your mind is pure, it'll reflect that God is within you. If it's impure, it will reflect nothing but what's outside of you, which is a lot of chaos and confusion. And you want to cut yourself in the image, not be cut in the image of Maya against your will. So, no foggy belief in random and serendipitous nature. And no excuses or inadvertence around one's inadequacy for accomplishing sadhana. Oh, I can't do it. It's too hard. I don't have the capacity for it. It's boring. It doesn't work. I give up. These are all mantras of failure. And you didn't stay long enough with it and dig deep enough into it with the right guide and the right group, in the right group of people, with the right teachings, Guru, Dharma, Sangha. Or the triple gem in Tibetan Buddhism, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Vayu, Punya, Jnana, Bhuktin, Kuru, Swaha in Tibetan. You want this triple gem first and foremost, and that will be your saving grace against all these things. These sentinels won't even have to come forward in your life and speak at you. See, like walking through a field and all of a sudden the tree talks at you. See? You're a fool. What are you doing? You don't want a sentinel to have to make that much of a appearance outwardly. Just stay with the mainstays of spiritual life and you'll be fine. Dharma, Sangha, teacher, that's all you need. And then let it purify you and refine you over time. Give it some time to mature, to live a long, healthy life. That the New Age is getting together. See, you may have to depend a little bit on invasive medicine. See, get a new lung or heart or whatever. Whatever, that's immaterial to the main point of your being here. I mean, by the time most of us need a new heart, we're through with the experiences of life anyway. Do I want to do this again is the question. Not, can you extend my life for another 20 years in an old body? What's the matter with you? See? So, come to know your birthless, deathless self that doesn't have an anatomical heart. It has an atmic heart. The anatomical heart will clog up on you. The Atman never, free, open. Your highest guide. Your saving grace. Your guardian angel. Whatever you want to call it. That's it. Finally then, no false refuge in ignorance, unpreparedness, unworthiness, or poor upbringing. You can see that this is a list of a person who lives in this day and age, who's observed snow conditions in people, looked at the consciousness of people on all levels in the West and seeing what they're up against and what's the problems with them and how many excuses they're making for themselves or who they're blaming, the weakness that Vivekananda pointed out in us. He said the worst sin is weakness. You must have great strength to follow the spiritual path. So you can't go halfway with it or make it into a sort of fad that will last 10 or 20 years. Got to go back to the eternal Dharma, bring it forward, know it, live it. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasanam, Satchapkara. That is, hear the truth, and then reason it, realize it, and then live it. Bring it back into your life for all to see. Don't keep your light hidden under a bushel. Bring it back, see. But don't bring it back before you're ready. That would be having intensification before clarification. Clarify first, and then come out of any closet you want, or any cave, and broadcast it. Spread it, broadcast to everyone. I think we are moving along good, and I pat myself on the back for doing that in this case, because this chart must be seen and digested. It hasn't come up for several years in the Dharma of SRV. Now you're seeing it with this color facelift, and also no uncertain terms what modern or contemporary sadhana needs to note and what it needs to watch for. Now let's look at it on the level of Chit-Shuddhi, initial purification and transformation of mind, because these things followed the first point The second point here is that everything is to be practiced as a mental sadhana. That is, you can do some physical things, and you could do some food exercises, and you could do some breathing and all that. We're not saying that that's not a part of yoga. We're here saying that that's the lower limbs of yoga. But you must get to the higher limbs. Again, comes to my mind, somebody asked J. Krishnamurti on a video, see, in the 60s, he said, what does sexuality have to do with spiritual life? And he looked at him and said, why are you asking me? I mean, he's an old man, he's practically a monk. And everyone laughs and says, don't laugh about it, we must explore it. See? He says, so the idea is that there's this path in India called Tantra, and it uses sexual experience to raise yourself to a transcendent level. You use sexuality to get beyond sexuality. Pause. Then he says, but you never do it. It's so classic. And it would apply to things other than just relations and sexual intercourse. It would apply to everything you're doing. You're supposed to transcend it, but you never do. And that's the problem with becoming a professional student. So you need to become a realized soul. You're not nature. You're not Prakriti. You're the Purusha. You're not atomic particles. You're the Atman. You're not the changing Maya. You're the changeless Brahman. So to realize yourself, that's a high bar, but to realize yourself, sentinels, points of practice, golden rules to follow, this is what you apply. You memorize these and you make this a part of your sadhana. That's what I'm proposing. And it's to me, it's what Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda wanted to bring forward. And these are all contained in yoga, in Vedanta, in Buddhism, and other great scriptures. I just gathered together from different places and put them into a list that I thought would fit this age. So let's look at some of these purifications. Arya Samskara Pratibandhin, willingness to perceive and remove the subtle barriers which block the formation of positive mental samskaras. Sorry for the long sentence. Basically, it's a conjunction. So break it down. You have to be willing to perceive subtle barriers in your mind that are formed by thinking habits that have caused complexes. I'm trying to put it all in English. Complexes in your mind. These complexes, remember, are not just from your upbringing. So that's why you don't blame your mother, and so forth. They're from past lifetimes. India Dharma will point you immediately to past lifetimes to solve your problems, because they know that the roots of things are back there. They know that the effects of the causes are here, and people are working on the effects. How can I put it any more clearly? When people usually do sadhana, they're working on the effects of things. It's just like medicine treating the disease and not its cause, right? We say this all the time. It's the same with mental and psychological and philosophical disease too. You're working on the effects of things when you look at yourself in the mirror. That is a mind of the mirror, or the mirror of the mind, and you say, oh, I think I'll make myself better. But unless you see where the problems that manifested in this life came from, you can't get to their roots and extricate them by the roots. So everything you're doing seems to end up to be kind of surface-like. It doesn't really have the deepest effect you want. And so intensification, after clarification, you decide, I'm going to do that. There are many cases of illumined souls who did a whole regimen of sadhana, failed to get enlightenment right at the end. So they went back through their whole sadhana, did it again, and they inspected every step they did, and they found out there were little imperfections in some steps that magnified themselves when they got to the final doorway. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that very simply. If you try and put a thread through the eye of a needle and it has the tiniest little fiber hanging out, and you can't even see the fiber, it's very frustrating, and it won't pass. That's much better than easier for an elephant to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man. that's a lower teaching. This is a real teaching about subtle sadhana and realization. Is that when you finally get to that final enlightenment that you've been courting and desiring intensely all your life, and you can't make that final grade, then there was some raw material in your clay. Remember that story of the master? Potter fires a perfect pot. He's a master potter. Gets some new clay from somewhere, doesn't inspect it, makes a pot, puts it in the kiln, fires it, opens the kiln, it's broken apart, got cracks in it. That never happened to me. I suspect something. So he went back to his clay that he got from some other province, inspected it, microfilling glass, all that, and a magnifying glass, little bits of sand, a piece of glass, The material has imperfections in it. So he's not talking about potters and their art, he's talking about spiritual aspirants and their need to look at their own minds, the consciousness of their own mind, to remove these little defects. So I think that's pretty clear, even by those metaphors from Father of Yoga and Sri Ramakrishna, how this needs to be done. You must be able to remove subtle barriers which block the formation of positive mental samskaras. Now, I was putting that in the negative sense. Yeah, you want to get rid of the negative samskaras, but what about your possibility of creating positive samskaras? You're all here because of that. You have positive samskaras too. So you're laboring away at the mental ones, the negative ones, right? These are in my way, you see. So we teach about conjunctions and so forth and try and get your mind in a better perspective. It's not such a problem, you can do it. You can do it. See? So you go ahead and actuate the practice and you come to a culmination of it, and this time you succeed. And all of a sudden enlightenment is an accident upon you because you made yourself accident prone. You opened yourself up to this higher sweep of Dharma and this higher ability of sadhana to purify the mind. Because the self's already pure, the mind's in the way. Sometimes people's bodies are in the way, diseases. Sometimes people's energy is in the way, tamas. But ultimately, their minds are in their way. Because both body and energy were not healthy because the mind wasn't in the right perspective when it was born. Actually, when it died previously. This is what we don't know. The bardos. If the Tibetan Buddhists come along in this day and age, and it seems like Mao Zedong, caused that, he was the real cause of it, and the real point of that horror that was the invasion of Tibet by the Red Chinese was to chase the bee out of the hive so that we would get the Dharma. And then now we can see how everything works. That birth and death are really nothing. That countries are born and countries die. They pass in history. This is called phenomena. The great souls know about this and they forbear it. They'll come back 14 times in a new birth to tell you about it. And they did, and he has. And what are they going to tell you? These very same truths, see, that go back and remove the specks of impurity from the mind and your Buddha nature as soon as you do that. You always were. But there are some little overlays there that were fogging. There's the scene. So like parts on the eyes, you see. You wake up from sleep. You've got sleep on the eyes. Can't see right. Blink them a few times. So, okay, so we have just 10 minutes left. But basically, Samyak Darshana, proper view, then sentinels. And now we're talking about some very deep things that you need to do to purify your mind. That's the whole purpose of this, transformation of mind, so that the mind will become clear to see your true self. These are very deep practices that you need to do if you're a Vedantist, for instance, or a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji. So basically the next one is Smriti Shuddha. You must have effort to awaken and reveal the memory so as to bring about recollection of divine traits. Notice how every one of these is put in a positive sense. It's not just to get rid of negative samskaras, but it's to bring out your positive samskaras. It's just not to get rid of negative traits, but to bring out your positive ones. Here you water the flowers, not the weeds. You know the word for that, right? Pratipakshabhavanam. Nice long, many-syllabled Sanskrit word that they've known about forever. And I think St. Francis used it too in his own way in Christianity. So basically, you water the flowers, not the weeds. So here's what you're doing in the mind. You see that the mind is full of imperfections. You don't concentrate on them. You see the, like saying, there's the problem. Oh, the solution is right next to it. The problem didn't let me see the solution, so I go on laboring about the problem. It's a bad habit we have. And we then convince ourselves that we're worthless, or that's why you can't make any excuses for being worthless or not being prepared. You're just not opening your eyes on the scene. And your eyes have to be clear first, before you do, right? You open your eyes with sleep on them to some of these things, it's not going to help. You're going to see the negative. So, very, very precious list of Vedantic practices brought forth here. What else? Buddhehe parataha, ability to transcend logic and gain intuition in order to engender spiritual experience. I was going to sing a verse about that to you from the Avadut, but we want to finish this chart, so we'll move ahead. But basically, transcend logic, that is the buddhi. It's good to have rationale and logic, the Vedanta says at first, but it can become a stalemate for you. You have to go beyond the pragmatic. Beyond the pragmatic to the Purusha, to the witness of all. How about upaya pratyaya? Irrepressible determination to ensure arrival at the goal. So people get into spiritual life, have a good meditation, I've got it. Next week, oh, I guess I lost it. See? Next year, I think I had it, but it's gone again. Next year, maybe it's here for good, you see. I've been feeling great for a long time, I'm in sattva. But so that's a part of the process of spiritual. That's why you need a long life of health and good mind, good positive mind, to be able to ensure that you arrive at that goal. And if you don't arrive at that goal, all that work you did is not lost, Sri Krishna said. You've gained very positive samskaras. If you have another lifetime to live, it'll be a lifetime of much more light. Sri Aurobindo says. I was just reading about him yesterday, looking at the inside of Shakti Bhajans, I think. Beautiful quote by Sri Aurobindo in there that I had placed way back then in 1980 something. So he's talking about this better and better lifetime. It's called Krama Mukti, I think, gradual enlightenment. So a lot of us have come a long way if we were to actually see our past lifetimes. We've come a long way to this point. Now, what about this? What is a penultimate or advanced element of sadhana that we can put into place? That is, determination to ensure the arrival at the goal. We must have resolve about that. Yataman, firm control over all desires, emotions, thoughts, and the ego. He's writing that about the man in the cold trailer. Yesterday, wrapped in a blanket, reading the Upanishads, I wrote, I want to take you as my teacher. I said, well then welcome to the realm of mind purification, refinement of consciousness. You don't need to go outside your trailer or get outside of your blanket. Just keep that Upanishad there. When your arm becomes tired, put it down and meditate on what you just read. Just don't freeze to death in the interim. See? So basically you don't have to move one position from this spot. There's a song in India that says that. Oh mind, you don't have to go one step out of your own door, out of your own house. You'll get all the chastising experiences of relative life inside your own dwelling. Especially if you live with a wife and husband, right? Some people are thinking, see? You'll get all the chastising experiences of relativity inside your own dwelling. You don't have to go one step outside your door. And so it's like this immovable position of the mind. See? It's the mind that has to work on itself. And if it becomes stable, it can do that. If it's thinking many things and rushing around, how can it do that? In fact, as it rushes around, it gathers more problems for later. So, serious considerations for the sincere, straightforward aspirant after truth. No matter how long it takes, got to have that resolve, give yourself patience and so forth, have time for maturity, and plug these things in. Kala Shakti, development of skill in sacred sound and scripture. Music, philosophy, develop a skill in those things. This is the mother of the word. And here's where I go into long explications of Shakti and of meaning of words, Bhakti and all these things, and sing songs about it. You'll find those in the Shakti Advaita teachings and so forth that we've given on YouTube. But you'll know what I mean here then. The words are very profound, and sound is very dear. Hearing is the highest sense in India. Seeing comes after. Hearing, is very powerful. Hear the truth, and that's goes deep. Kala Shakti, it's even a very nice term for it, isn't it? Now you have utsaha, constant alertness with regard to spiritual exertions. Constant alertness. So, I never sleep. I have the insomnia of yoga. My body goes to sleep, my mind should stay there in one-pointed awareness. When I wake up, my body wakes up, yeah, I have to put up with that, but my mind never changed. I've made my mind steady. Upeksha ananyata, equanimity and single-mindedness. Of course, that's very yogic, about equilibrium. Driti, spiritual patience that knows no bounds. I can go through these last ones quickly because they're evident to all of us, obvious, and just things we need to remind ourselves about. Patience is something even we were talking about today on our ride here to the retreat center, that patience is just invaluable. You just have to always implement it. It was one of Holy Mother's favorite words, like the 3 Ps, actually 4 if you really look at it: purity, perseverance, and patience, and then practice. So if patience is one of those 4 Ps, as it were, then you know that you're not far from the goal. Penultimately, samatva, steadiness and even composure. And finally, titiksha, we were also talking about that today in our ride to the ashram, forbearance of all dualities. Titiksha, interesting because heat and cold are always plaguing you. So usually, we had very cold weather here in Hawaii. Yes, we're very cold here in Hawaii. Please come help us. See, we're having cold weather in Hawaii. What's that about? And then all of a sudden you put on clothes and you get hot, right? So you have to go take them off and you get cold again. So you've got this titiksha going on. It's a practice of forbearance. It's one of the 6 jewels of Vedanta, as you know. So that increases your stamina, makes you strong, gets rid of your weaknesses and all of that. So titiksha, very important to the Vedantist and also to this list. Not really a bad thing to end with things like patience and forbearance, because those are kind of obvious, as I said. These other ones, very subtle, but you can look at them and roll them over and over in your mind and come up with the apt conclusions, as we do when we are sincere spiritual aspirants and seekers of the highest truth. So here we must end, as we've gone a few minutes past. Let's end here with a quick chant. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Joitir Gamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamoya Abhira Bhira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.